"I'm going to make a big request of you today," he said, pocketing his souvenirs with satisfaction. "So I thought you ought to know something about me. I didn't want you to think I was just some nobody. You see, I usually find myself among strangers because I drift here and there, trying to forget the sad thing that happened to me." He hesitated. "You'll hear about it this afternoon." "At lunch?" "No, this afternoon. I happened to find out that you're taking Miss Baker to tea." "Do you mean you're in love with Miss Baker?" "No, old sport, I'm not, but Miss Baker has kindly consented to speak to you about this matter." I hadn't the faintest idea what "this matter" was, but I was more annoyed than interested. I hadn't asked Jordan to tea in order to discuss Mr. J. Gatsby. I was sure the request would be something utterly fantastic, and for a moment I was sorry I'd ever set foot upon his overpopulated lawn. He wouldn't say another word. His correctness grew on him as we neared the city. We passed Port Roosevelt, where there was a glimpse of red-belted ocean-going ships, and sped along a cobbled slum lined with the dark, undeserted saloons of the faded gilt 1900s. Then the Valley of Ashes opened out on both sides of us, and I had a glimpse of Mrs. Wilson straining at the garage pump with panting vitality as we went by. With fenders spread like wings, we scattered light through half Long Island City. Only half, for as we twisted among the pillars of the elevated, I heard the familiar jug-jug spat of a motorcycle, and a frantic policeman rode alongside. "All right, old sport," called Gatsby. We slowed down. Taking a white card from his wallet, he waved it before the man's eyes. "Right you are," agreed the policeman, tipping his cap. "Know you next time, Mr. Gatsby. Excuse me." "What was that?" I inquired. "The picture of Oxford?" "I was able to do the commissioner a favour once, and he sends me a Christmas card every year." Over the great bridge, with the sunlight through the girders making a constant flicker upon the moving cars, with the city rising up across the river in white heaps and sugar lumps, all built with a wish out of non-olfactory money. The city seen from the Queensborough Bridge is always the city seen for the first time, in its first wild promise of all the mystery and the beauty in the world. A dead man passed us in a hearse heaped with blooms, followed by 2 carriages with drawn blinds, and by more cheerful carriages for friends. The friends looked out at us with tragic eyes and short upper lips of southeastern Europe, and I was glad that the sight of Gatsby's splendid car was included in their sombre holiday. As we crossed Blackwell's Island, a limousine passed us, driven by a white chauffeur, in which sat 3 modish negroes, 2 bucks and a girl. I laughed aloud as the yolks of their eyeballs rolled toward us in haughty rivalry. Anything can happen now that we've slid over this bridge, I thought. Anything at all. Even Gatsby could happen, without any particular wonder. Roaring noon. In a well-fanned 42nd Street cellar I met Gatsby for lunch. Blinking away the brightness of the street outside, my eyes picked him out obscurely in the anteroom, talking to another man. "Mr. Carroway, this is my friend Mr. Wolfsheim." A small, flat-nosed Jew raised his large head and regarded me with 2 fine growths of hair which luxuriated in either nostril. After a moment I discovered his tiny eyes in the half-darkness. "So I took one look at him," said Mr. Wolfsheim, shaking my hand earnestly. "And what do you think I did?" "What?" I inquired politely. But evidently he was not addressing me, for he dropped my hand and covered Gatsby with his expressive nose. "I handed the money to Catspaw, and I said, 'All right, Catspaw, don't pay him a penny till he shuts his mouth.' He shut it then and there." Gatsby took an arm of each of us and moved forward into the restaurant, whereupon Mr. Wolfsheim swallowed a new sentence he was starting and lapsed into a somnambulatory abstraction. "Highballs?" asked the head waiter. "This is a nice restaurant here," said Mr. Volsheim, looking at the Presbyterian nymphs on the ceiling. "But I like across the street better." "Yes, highballs," agreed Gatsby, and then to Mr. Volsheim, "It's too hot over there." "Hot and small, yes," said Mr. Volsheim, "but full of memories." "What place is that?" I asked. "The old Metropole." "The old Metropole," brooded Mr. Volsheim gloomily. "Filled with faces dead and gone, filled with friends gone now forever. I can't forget so long as I live the night they shot Rosie Rosenthal there. It was 6 of us at table, and Rosie had eat and drunk a lot all evening. When it was almost morning, the waiter came up to him with a funny look, and says somebody wants to speak to him outside. 'All right,' says Rosie, and begins to get up, and I pulled him down in his chair. 'Let the bastards come in here if they want you, Rosie, but don't you, so help me, move outside this room.' It was 4 o'clock in the morning then, and if we'd raised of the blinds we'd have seen daylight." "Did he go?" I asked innocently. "Sure he went!" Mr. Volsheim's nose flashed at me indignantly. "He turned around in the door and says, 'Don't let that waiter take away my coffee.' Then he went out on the sidewalk, and they shot him 3 times in his full belly and drove away." "4 of them were electrocuted," I said, remembering. "5 with Becker." His nostrils turned to me in an interested way. "I understand you're looking for a business connection." The juxtaposition of these 2 remarks was startling. Gatsby answered for me. "Oh, no," he exclaimed. "This isn't the man." "No?" Mr. Volsheim seemed disappointed. "This is just a friend. I told you we'd talk about that some other time." "I beg your pardon," said Mr. Volsheim. "I had the wrong man." A succulent hash arrived, and Mr. Volsheim, forgetting the more sentimental atmosphere of the old Metropole, began to eat with ferocious delicacy. His eyes, meanwhile, roved very slowly all around the room. He completed the arc by turning to inspect the people directly behind. I think that, except for my presence, he would have taken one short glance beneath our own table. "Look here, old sport," said Gatsby, leaning toward me. "I'm afraid I made you a little angry this morning in the car." There was the smile again, but this time I held out against it. "I don't like mysteries," I answered, "and I don't understand why you won't come out frankly and tell me what you want. Why has it all got to come through Miss Baker?" "Oh, it's nothing underhand," he assured me. "Miss Baker's a great sportswoman, you know, and she'd never do anything that wasn't all right." Suddenly he looked at his watch, jumped up, and hurried from the room, leaving me with Mr. Volsheim at the table. "He has the telephone," said Mr. Volsheim, following him with his eyes. "Fine fellow, isn't he? Handsome to look at, and a perfect gentleman." "Yes." "He's an Oxford man." "Oh." "He went to Oxford College in England. You know Oxford College?" "I've heard of it." "It's one of the most famous colleges in the world." "Have you known Gatsby for a long time?" I inquired. "Several years," he answered in a gratified way. "I made the pleasure of his acquaintance just after the war, but I knew I had discovered a man of fine breeding after I talked with him an hour. I said to myself, 'There's the kind of man you'd like to take home and introduce to your mother and sister.'" He paused. "I see you're looking at my cuff buttons." I hadn't been looking at them, but I did now. They were composed of oddly familiar pieces of ivory. "Finest specimens of human molars," he informed me. "Well," I inspected them, "that's a very interesting idea." "Yeah." He flipped his sleeves up under his coat. "Yeah, Gatsby's very careful about women. He would never so much as look at a friend's wife." When the subject of this instinctive trust returned to the table and sat down, Mr. Volsheim drank his coffee with a jerk and got to his feet. "I have enjoyed my lunch," he said, "and I'm going to run off from you two young men before I outstay my welcome." "Don't hurry, Meyer," said Gatsby, without enthusiasm. Mr. Volfsheim raised his hand in a sort of benediction. "You're very polite, but I belong to another generation," he announced solemnly. "You sit here and discuss your sports and your young ladies and your—" He supplied an imaginary noun with another wave of his hand. "As for me, I am 50 years old, and I won't impose myself on you any longer." As he shook hands and turned away, his tragic nose was trembling. I wondered if I had said anything to offend him.